Hi, welcome back to Unique Minds of the Okanagan. I'm Robb, and we're on location in Kelowna with Luke, one third of Pharm, a extremely talented progressive band from Kelowna. How you doing?
Doing well. How you doing, buddy?
Good. Thanks for having me. Why don't you introduce yourself and let us know who you are and where you're from, how you started music.
Yeah, I'm Luke. As you mentioned, from Pharm. I do the bass and the vocals, sometimes the keyboards.
Oh, sweet.
Just professionally ripping off Geddy Lee at every turn I can. From Regina, Saskatchewan, so it's kind of nice to live here in Kelowna, see some mountains and elevation. Got started when I was a little gaffer on the piano and moved to guitar. Then I started listening to Primus and couldn't stop thinking about bass riffs in my head all day. And here we are now.
That's awesome. How long have you been a musician for?
Oh, yeah, good 25 years now. Started when I was a little guy on the piano, so I still do a bit of that.
You were in a band prior to Pharm, locally, right?
Yeah,
What was the band name again?
it's called Marcy's Beach. And we put out a little bit of music, but mostly you'd see us down at the cover bars playing horrible songs. And every time I hear one of those songs on the radio, I kind of wince and cringe a little bit. I think, good Lord, I hope nobody remembers that.
That's fine. So as Pharm has become, and I would say one of Kelowna's top bands, as your guys' sound is completely different than anybody else's locally that I find. So being the vocals and the bass, and I would say the driving force rhythmically behind the band, besides drums, how do you approach writing?
Usually it starts with kind of either like a bass riff that I'll just kind of sit there and play all day. Or maybe we got like a cool drum beat and I'm just like struggling to put something over top because the timing's all wacky and crazy. But I like to do like weird timings, but make it not sound so crazy or not too nerdy. So it's all these things fighting against each other, and we always do the lyrics last because I gotta like read a whole book and kind of condense it, do some sci-fi nerdy stuff.
That's awesome. Your lyrics, what are your lyrics about mostly?
There's lots of wizards and aliens and stuff that almost certainly drives all the ladies away from the show. And the unfortunate thing is ladies make up half of the population, so you're really kind of excluding a big market. But it's always nice to get a mix of everybody out there, as long as we can make sure they can't dance properly to the grooves.
Yeah, prog is definitely a unique flavor that I think a lot of people have a hard time getting used to. And I think you have to have a deep rooted understanding of not just musicianship and music, but feeling. There's a different vibe when it comes to playing off times. And like, it's people are used to 4/4 where they end up on the same, on that one count is always the same circular motion. And I love like 7/8, for example, because you're always bouncing back and forth with those odd times. It's this weird pendulum that I find is just a beautiful thing when it comes to progressive music. But I find it hard to find. It's hard to find good bands that can play prog, and I think that you guys have captured such a unique element with it, and I think that it shows in the turnouts. I couldn't make it to the last show, but Norm and Josh, I'm pretty sure, showed up to the last one, and Norm went so hard he broke the soles in his shoes. And the thing is, like, he's trying to describe the energy because it's not like you guys are heavy, but it's not like the typical metal show. The sound that you bring is so unique and diverse that I think it's more captivating than the band who's got the craziest breakdown. When like your influences come from Geddy Lee, so Rush is a huge, obviously a huge influence. When you're creating your songs, like what is the most typical direction that you go when you're sitting there? Do you usually start off with the chorus, or do you work, like you mentioned you had the riff? How do you choose that that's the chorus or the verse, like in your mind?
Usually kind of like start at the start and just do it linearly. And like it being prog, it's super nerdy already, but I take it one level even nerdier. And these days, I actually like make a spreadsheet and I got like 0 to 10 seconds, 10 to 20, and I start to color code the song just so it's not too samey and like make sure there's enough different parts. So usually kind of start to end, but it's like, oh, there's not enough of this red chunk here in my spreadsheet. It's not going to work well with the audience, our built-in audience. So I'm an engineer by trade, so I'm always doing that nerdy stuff, and all day at work I'm doing spreadsheets. So it's like, well, let's make this more fun.
So you take it in a very logical, scientific approach as a musician.
Yeah, sorta, yeah.
I like that. It is very math oriented, and I think I think that's might be why you gravitate toward it, because you're great with numbers,
Yeah,
and that's what it is. It's such a math game.
could be, but even like some of the stuff I listen to, it's like nobody else wants to hear it. It's like the mathiest and the nerdiest of it all. I'll be on the car and somebody's going to tell me to turn it right away. So I try to kind of add some of that little flavor that a regular, not nerdy person could enjoy.
I love the amount of nerdiness that comes with prog, and it is very true. There's a lot of bands, like Dream Theater is probably one of my favorite bands that's progressive in the sense that like their music, you can never guess what's coming next. And there's two types of music that I feel are on another level, and that would be jazz and progressive metal. And it is strictly because they have no limits. Where most bands are writing, especially nowadays, I find is very cut, copy, paste. There's a structure that seems to work. For example, Electric Callboy has found that structure. Their Hypa Hypa song became the same structure that they use in every song that has become their popular hits.
Yeah, the formula.
Exactly. It's the exact formula that they use, and they don't tend to steer from that formula, which as a musician, I feel like we're always supposed to be pushing it. And I think that's why I appreciate prog. And I also understand why people who are just listeners have a hard time like attaching to it. But there's a huge push for it now. We were speaking with Alex from Planet Killer before with one of our first interviews, and we were talking about Polyphia and animals as leaders, and how they're pushing things to a different level, especially Polyphia in my mind, and animals as leaders. There's tons of other prog bands out there, but there's something that they're doing that is almost symphonic.
Yeah, they got like the blending of the genres, and you never know what's gonna come.
When you guys approach, like, when you take your idea to the band, do you often find that the vision you had changes?
Definitely, yeah. We all write together, so I might have like a few parts, and then it's gonna go somewhere crazy, like you never expect it to. It's get like a weird drum fill, or like even exchanging the ideas back and forth with the guitar. It's he'll interpret it a different way, and then it's like, oh, that's nicer than what I thought, and it just becomes this kind of cosmic soup by the end of it.
I like that, because do you find, this is a question that I tend to ask bands constantly, is there's a unique spiritual connection, a telepathical connection that bands have with each other, especially when it comes to like bands who jam a lot and have a lot of instrumental aspects, where you can close your eyes and nobody's doing that visual cues. It's all just telepathical cues. And trying to like express that to people who don't play music is very like expressing a religion that is brand new. You know what I mean? And I think that's one of the most magical aspects of music that I really enjoy, and I find a lot of bands have, and we don't kind of like talk about it. It's just a really weird thing that is musician.
Yeah.
It doesn't have, like, actors don't have that, painters don't have that. It is strictly just people who play music.
Or you come up with like a new vocabulary, you know, you gotta do like a and it's like, yep, that makes sense to somebody else. Maybe two other people understand exactly what you're saying, but
Yeah, musician talk.
8 billion other people saying, what are you talking about?
Yeah, no, that is probably one of my favorite things. Is I want to play boogie the bomb bomb bomb. I know exactly what you mean. When you so are you the manager as well behind everything?
Sorta. We got a few buds out in the city here who do kind of management type stuff. We got like a numbers guy and a grants guy and kind of a filming guy. And so it's like a little community. There's 3 of us who will be on the album title, but everybody helps out. I do kind of like the spreadsheets. I'm adding up all the bills and all that fun stuff. So that's actually why I'm in the band. That's my favorite part.
The management
The music comes second, but just the accounting and the treasurer position is what I really like to do.
It's funny because that's what I do for Storm the Empire, and at first it was kind of a job, and the more that I got into it, and the more I saw the results, and when we put in the effort, what we got back, really became rewarding, and now it's become a game to see how much I can save for the band, and
Yeah.
you know what I mean, and how far we can go. Because when you look at it as a business, it's like when you're getting grants, grants are intimidating, first of all, and most people are very scared to even, they see the first half of it, and that's like just what's accepted and what's ineligible, what's eligible, and how much like the amounts are, and people get intimidated. To have somebody helping you with grants is a huge benefit, especially when it comes to touring, and you guys tend to tour quite a bit.
We do, yeah.
Was it last year that you did Wacken?
Yeah, 2023.
Okay, so 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And you guys went quite far on that.
Yeah, we got to the Western Canadian finals, where a BC band has never got past.
No, I know. Which is
this year it's in Vancouver though, so
yeah,
super fun though.
How was that experience?
Really good. We played in Vancouver and we came first in that, and it was pretty great experience. Weird though, being normally you play a show and it's all your buds, but here you've got judges and stuff, so there's this whole element where it's like these guys are your friends, but it's like, oh, I gotta beat you. But so that's like a whole new element that was pretty unusual, but good exposure, and especially for us, 'cause we don't always like fit in. It's like here's a metal band, and then there's this weird band. It's like sometimes it's jazzy, and we got like bright flamingo shirts on, and we don't really look the part. So it was nice to get recognized like that. Yeah, it's just, sometimes we don't get taken too seriously as a metal band, and sometimes we don't necessarily want to either, but just to get like that little pat on the back.
I think the recognition that you guys get, especially after that, like, Pharm is always, like, in my perspective, coming as a musician and a promoter, has always been a big name locally. Like, you guys you sell shows out, your shows are incredibly high energy and unmatched on energy level in my mind. The way you play on stage is really fun to watch. And same with Tegan, I believe his name is, your guys' drummer, right? Like, incredibly talented people, high energy, happy and outgoing, which is also, I think, a very big positive for you guys. Is metal bands take themselves way too seriously, and it's really annoying. Like, you're not warriors from Hungary, or, like, you know what I mean? Like, as a metal musician, I try to steer away from writing about that kind of stuff and write about, like, more realistic things and relatable things.
Personal, yeah.
And I find that, like, we kind of are on our own separate thing, being a metalcore band in a very, like, deathcore, death metal area. And I think that you guys winning Whack-In and making it all the way to the other side was a huge eye-opener for a lot of the other bands, realizing like you don't have to be a metal band to be an amazing performance and still be heavy. And I think that's where there's slightly an issue with our scene, is it's very cliquey and a lot of bands will stick to each other and play with the same bands. And it's nice to see when bands play with different ones in different genres. Like my favorite thing is to set up a show where it builds.
Yeah.
You know, not just like, oh, we have 10 or 5 deathcore bands. Like
different genres.
Yeah, like your music tastes, everybody, if you're a metalhead, you're going to love punk. You're going to love rock and vice versa. If you're a punk guy, you're going to love metal all the way up.
Yeah.
There's no reason to have
nobody
one
wants
genre.
to like go to a restaurant and eat 5 steaks in a row if you got change it up, you get your salads and your soups and
Yeah, exactly. I love the reference. And there is such like a diversity of music here that I think working together is a huge thing. I just sat was invited to Ignite the Arts Industry Connector yesterday with Norm. And when you see the other festival promoters are working together and promoters are working together to put on shows, and this is singer-songwriters and rock and art promoters, it really makes me realize why those artists shine versus our metal community, because it is very, like you said, it's not a competition, but it's kind of a competition. Like we're always trying to be the best locally versus making the scene the best.
Yeah, build up a nice good spot for Kelowna to be.
Yeah, and I think that what you guys do is you bring big chunks from everybody's group to you, which kind of, it shows that you guys shine above a lot of other bands, and not in the sense that your grind shines harder, is what I guess I should say. The way you guys hustle, you entertain, you perform, and you tour is almost as another artist, it's intimidating to watch how far and how quickly you guys can get. So to sit down with you and get to hear like where it starts and where you guys are planning to go, because it'd be really nice to see you guys be the next big thing out of Kelowna. There's a lot of talented art, and I want to see you guys be it. What are you currently working on?
We're going to do a whole new album in April. So that came up really quick. We wrote the songs over the last winter and do another big cycle. Like we went to Quebec and back with the first album. So hopefully this time we can get to PEI and back.
See, like right there. How was touring to Quebec? What were the challenges? What have you found the biggest challenges been with touring?
It was great. I mean, I would say it's good to know people along the way, like which we did. We had great places to stay. Everybody was super nice, and then we hit Southern Ontario, which I don't want to slag any regions of the country. Everybody was very nice, but we didn't know anybody there, so we wound up sleeping in a farty van in truck stops for about a week straight. So had to hit the chiropractor pretty hard when we came back, but it was nice to see some friendly faces when we returned, and I would definitely do it again. You plant the little seeds along the way. That was pretty cool.
Did you guys have a grant for the tour?
No, we never have ever won a grant.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I don't know, people kind of see, it just doesn't make sense what we do on paper, and even like radios, like no organizations really like us, but you go to like a club or whatever, you talk to somebody who's like, oh, that's the best, and then nobody else wants to touch it really, so we kind of, it's like, well, we'll do it ourselves, do everything ourselves.
So how do you go about self-funding a tour across Canada? That's a huge feat.
Yeah, well, just sometimes you got to eat food out of dumpsters, and I don't condone siphoning gas. I'm not admitting to have doing that. I'm just saying I don't condone it. And you do what you do. You rely on friends along the way. And hopefully every now and then you get a good turnout that'll get you some gas money to the next city. And yeah, a little saving here and there.
Do you find that getting guarantees is a hard thing with the style that you play?
It's about 50-50. Like, I know some venues are hesitant to give us a guarantee, but some kind of insisted, and it's like, well, I don't know. Like, are you sure you'll be able to cover this? And they're like, yeah, probably. And they've never heard us before or don't know who we are. So it's like, okay. And sometimes you luck out and the person you talked to and got the guarantee from wasn't there that night and you're still selling tickets and you get a little extra bonus.
The joys of being a touring band, right? What has been your top 3 favorite cities in Canada to perform at?
Oh, that's a tricky one. I really enjoyed Regina. It was my hometown, and not really through any merit of our own, but we just got placed as a headliner by accident on a festival that was happening there. So we got to play at the bar I used to go to when I was growing up there, and it was just packed because it was the end of this festival by accident.
That's awesome.
Had a lot of fun in Quebec. If you get out to rural Quebec, don't lump them in with the rest of Canada. That was where we turned around, was in Rimouski, and I said, thank you, this is far we're going in Canada, everybody's been so nice. And I got booed, and I didn't understand why, but it's because I didn't pay enough attention in history class, and there's a bit of a separatist movement. You know, half people were cheering and half were booing, so that was almost exactly how that election went. So you learn things along the way, so pay attention in history, everybody.
Things you don't even think about,
yeah.
Right?
Toronto was very fun. We got accidentally lumped in with the Canadian Music Week, I believe it's called. I should know that. That's why we don't get grants, because I don't know about huge festivals that are well established. But we got added to the folk night because they saw our name. So it was like Lou Gunderson and the Turnips and Guff Brookings and the Good Old Boys, and they saw Pharm and assumed we were folk rock band. So there we were, 2 a.m, and everybody's heard enough mandolin for about a week or two, and then all of a sudden we go, ah! And then the whole place went nuts. So that was super fun as well.
Oh man, that is awesome. I love tour stories, so I want to dive into those. What was the craziest experience that happened on tour?
Well, we wound up, I don't know, lots of good ones, but when we played in Thunder Bay, we played at like a electronic music club, so it was like nobody knew what to expect, and the opening band, they had like accordions and stuff, so they did a good job like matching kind of weirdness up when it's not usually their forte. But so we're playing, they got crazy sound systems, which was awesome. And then they invited us, they had an after party when we're done playing at the nightclub. And I was like, okay, what are we walking into? There's like a nice fella's house. He's like restores harpsichords. Well, we're getting treated to some Mozart and Bach. And it's like, oh, this is not what I expected. And he's like, hey, you guys want to come into the sauna? So you got... very relaxing, you know. Who would have expected a nice sauna and harpsichord treat after the electronic music club?
Wow, that's you just get like the classiest of classy after parties. That's awesome. Usually they're like the dingiest little apartments and everyone's crammed into them.
Oh, I left my monocle back at home. I didn't have enough room. My top hat was completely crushed by that point in the tour after loading and unloading the van the whole time.
That's funny. So when you approach the business aspect of it, what has been the hardest thing for you to figure out?
Probably, like I said, like the grants, I think. Like we find success everywhere else, but never, we just apply for grants and never get them. So it's like, I just don't even want to do this anymore. Just keep doing it ourselves.
I think independence is key though.
Yeah, it's really nice. And it's like, we're Pharm. It's like, we're not Pharm sponsored by Subway. Thank you for the the double cheese supreme loan you gave us, and I'm obligated to say this at every stop now.
It's grants are a hard thing, like we were saying. They're intimidating. Plus, you have to have everything so to a T lined up ahead of time, especially tour grants. I think you have to have like 80% of the tour booked ahead of time
Yeah,
before
that's
they'll
tricky.
even fund it, and that's where it becomes hard because how can you book 80% and make sure, because if any of those dates fall out too, I believe you do lose the grant. So,
Yep.
and how many of those dates can cancel?
Yeah, it's like a little house of cards.
It is. So it's very difficult as a band to get anywhere, and I find it's like the same thing as just that exposure. Getting out is hard, especially nowadays with social media. I think you have to be, we always talk about it, but you have to be like, wear so many different hats as a musician, where growing up we just had to put flyers out and people saw them and were down to go to the show. People with attention spans that are like 3 to 5 seconds, it's really hard to like capture that and get them to come out without building a dedicated fan base. How do you guys find your turnouts are with the way that you promote shows? Because I feel like they're pretty good.
It's yeah, and you kind of learn over time. Like, I've found, if you're going somewhere you've never been before, like, I'll slap 50, $60 on advertisements online, and it's like, it's like, oh, I don't want to do that. But even, you get 5 more people there, you've made your money back, and then there's 5 more people watching your show.
That's a good way to look at it.
Also, I like to do kind of crazy stunts before some of our shows sometimes, and hopefully that gets people talking.
Like what? Give us an example.
Some of them I probably shouldn't say. You could look them up. Often they involve fireworks. I one time ate a firework that was inside of a burrito. And it's nice living out here in the country. One time we set up a whole thing where we were trying to catch a cigarette ghost. I did a whole goblin compilation before this last one, so that's kind of why I really wanted to be in the band in the first place, was to do these crazy stunts, and then the music was all secondary. But over time, it's gone the other way, and it's like, oh, I gotta think of something.
That's funny. Do you find that do you guys produce, like, you're not signed at all?
No.
So it's completely 100% independent. Do you think you ever would go steer away from being independent?
I think certain labels we're interested in, but it's just something we talk about. Nobody's gone to the effort of drafting up like a nice email to somebody and say, hey, please, we like your other bands. What about us?
I feel like I have this weird concept when I'm booking anything or emailing anyone. Is just the worst case is they can say no. The amount of people that I've emailed for trying to get the band picked up before we got picked up with the labels we are on was pretty ridiculous. And I think that it's just that constant grind, which is really hard, especially nowadays, because you have to have a minimum of 10,000 followers on every social, which is how?
It's like, if you're on the label, you could get that.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So it's kind of like a catch-22. You have to have like so much work put in and years and like 5 to 10 years of grind before they even look at you. And then it's the point of having them when you've already done that much work. And I think that that's kind of what our industry is slowly pushing towards, is like we've seen it just constantly snowballing from record labels being a major thing to bands being able to do everything independently. And I'm kind of thankful with it. And I think being independent also kind of gives you the freedom to, like you said, write what you want.
Yeah. I've heard like a lot of bands, Canadian bands that I like, and they were independent, and it's like really, really, really good. Then they get picked up, and then their next album is like, oh, this is the worst thing I've ever heard in my whole life. And it's like, why did that happen?
I find it's because they have to make what sells. And
Yes.
it's like the weird thing about the music industry, My favorite documentary that explains it is the 30 Seconds to Mars one. If you haven't seen it, I believe it's called This Is War, and it's about that album that they wrote with Kings and Queens. And their record label had, like, one of the only bands to ever get out of their major record deal, besides Radiohead. And they took, like, the label and, like, the industry gives you $1 million for a record deal, but you owe them 1.5 back. So you can never get out of debt in the big mainstream industry once you're signed, because you're constantly $500,000 in debt with every album, which is why most artists don't own the rights to their music. And then once you see remastered is when they've bought the rights to their music again and re-put it out so they can make money. But that's why, like, everyone has to have a perfume line or a clothing line, is that to get themselves out of debt. And growing up, I always thought you had to be signed to a major label to make music a career. Yes and no. I feel like you're on the right path where you can do it independent. The hardest thing is getting the numbers and the people to see you. And I think in a time where the musicians just have to figure out that loophole through trendiness, if that makes sense.
Which is tough.
It is.
Yeah. Especially, we're just like three real ugly guys, so you got to play some good music.
Well, and that's the thing, right? Like, that's all it used to matter about was the music. And then it changes. It changes also as you grow older. The way you look at music, the way you play your music. Have you found, this is kind of a segue, but have you found the older you've got, what you're writing becomes more intricate and less, like, angsty?
I'd say so, yeah. The new stuff we're doing, I'm playing it live. It's like, oh man, I actually have to warm up and practice. And I'll go to the old stuff, and it's like a breeze. But some people are like, how do you do that? It's like, it's easy now. But now it's like, okay, got to do the scales. And I think kind of as you age, maybe some of your emotions sort of soften a little bit. It's like, I don't hate my parents anymore. Yeah. It's more like, how do I make a song sound cool and heavy about like a real great, comfortable pair of shoes? Just whatever I'm feeling really strongly about at the time.
That's true. I think that too, like, writing is a really hard thing now when everything's been done. That's where prog shines, because it hasn't all been done. Versus, like, a singer-songwriter, you can only play so many chords for so long before you have to expand out. And same with metal, you can only play so many open chugs before people get really bored of it and move on to the next thing. I feel that prog is just a little ahead of its time. I feel like in the next, like, 10 years, that's what music is going to gravitate towards more. Like, the emergence of EDM, which is basically prog music, just not with musicians. It kind of expanded people's mind to what they'll enjoy melody-wise. Because there's a lot of EDM that's crazy melodies, and it changes up quite a bit, and people tend to follow towards that. And I think that's why Polyphia and Animals as Leaders shine so much.
Yeah.
And people that wouldn't necessarily have found prog have found Polyphia because it's pretty.
Yeah.
There's
different.
There's not a lot of distortion on it. It's almost got a hip hop. It's got a lot of hip hop elements to it, especially trap, where they're adding in, like, the weirdest hi-hat combos that you would hear in a trap song. And I think people really gravitate towards that, but that is in itself very progressive, because metal musicians are very quick to say blast beats are the master. You know what I mean? Like, you need blast beats, but music itself isn't about how fast it can be, how heavy it can be. It's this butterfly. You know,
Yeah.
it's this cocoon that needs to just kind of let it do its thing, and
You can do a
over the
little chunk of
evolution,
it and then you kind of let it breathe and add some dynamics and
that is dynamics is very key. And I think that like what I gravitate towards, especially about bands like Animals as Leaders, is like when they break into a clean part, and it's like no drums, and there's just this clean guitar, and it's delayed, and it just sounds so euphoric that it's just like, where can you go from here emotionally, right? Because
yeah.
it gives you such an emotional. I don't know. That's what I love about music. Is just there's like, it can't be defined in words, and it's almost hard to capture what you do live, which is into the recordings.
Yeah, for sure. You hear a lot of people's like, "Oh, they sound better live," or yeah, sometimes the other way around. But
Blue Oyster Cult is one of those. I found they're definitely way better in studio than they are live. I feel that that's also like what lacks in today's music is how things are recorded. I enjoy the way the process that it is now, where it's quick and easy, but I hate the sound of our songs recorded versus the live versions.
get the energy in there.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
Plus, if you record to a click, then you're kind of stuck in this box for your recorded stuff, and then you go live and it's breathing.
do you guys work with in-ears and all that as well?
No, we were just super, super duper basic. We were grumbling the other day. We played in Vancouver and had to show up an hour early to do sound check. And it's like, oh, just do it live. We're relaxing in the hotel. It's like, no, it's one extra thing we got to do. It's just do it live. I don't care if the first two songs sound horrible. I'm having a good time sitting down.
I'm pretty guilty for that as well, where I will. I hate soundcheck. I hate it so much. It's such an awkward thing too, and especially when the venue's open. Like if you're like second band and it's like quick line check, and you're just like staring at the crowd, and you're like, they're like, give me vocals.
Pizza rolls already.
Hi.
Table number 3.
Yeah. When you first started as a musician, what was your biggest inspiration? Like, who was the one that made you want to be a musician?
I was playing guitar and I was just like a little guy. So I was into like horrible kind of, at the time, as was the fashion at the time, it was the pop punk music. And oh man, what was I thinking when I look back now? Then I heard AC/DC when I was a little guy, and that was kind of the gateway drug. It's like, oh man, this rocks so hard. And it just opened up like a rabbit hole into, you know, you get into your Led Zeppelins and your Pink Floyds, all those classics, and then it just kind of get like weirder and heavier. And so I think AC/DC was the first real one that I can look back at today and not want to beat up a younger version of myself.
That's funny. I think that that's like everyone's gateway. Zeppelin and
Yeah.
AC/DC and
Yeah.
Guns N' Roses. And
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was weird. I went from Guns N' Roses and Led Zeppelin, and then my cousin showed me Children of Bodom.
Oh, yeah.
And instantly I was like, I want this.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like 11 or so when I first heard Needle 24/7. And I
Yeah.
was just like, my God, this is so cool.
Yeah, my friend's older brother got me into Bodom, and it's just like, this is the best.
Right? And
This
then
is awesome.
it's so good. That's what I just love about music. And then what has been your biggest challenge as a musician?
I guess just practicing enough. Like, I think anybody who plays probably wishes they practiced more. And some people, I was talking to actually Robb there, and he said, you must practice all the time. It's like, maybe once a month. And it's just like, anytime I do, something great can come out of it. But it's like, well, I like to sit around and eat chips too. So I think just not practicing enough.
I think that is a very common thing between musicians, is especially when you're not just a bedroom guitar player. Like when you're a bedroom guitar player, you're constantly sitting there and doing that. But like when you grow up, you've got jobs, you've got hobbies, you've got spouses and kids, and it's really difficult to separate time and energy for music, especially practice. Like practicing, you don't want to play the same song 1,000 times over and over and over and over. So you don't want to play it. Like if you've played the same song live for 3 years, you don't need to practice it anymore.
Yeah, you get out the metronome and the tablature and the cup of tea. It's a lot of preparation.
I'm very guilty of never touching my instrument in between shows. Unless I'm like, oh, I have an idea I want to write. And then I'm really bad at like writing the idea, recording it, and never touching it again. How many unfinished songs do you have?
Oh, there's about like 500 recordings in my cell phone right now, so it's usually just like one riff, and it's like, oh, I'll bring that to the fellas, but you never go back and look. It's like whatever's the newest thing. Yeah. One day I'll make a 500 part song.
That would be so cool.
And it'll be about 1,000 seconds long based on what's in my phone.
Where do you guys record?
We go to Arc House Studios here in town.
Okay.
So Adam Whitkey, shout out to Adam Whitkey. He works at Cato. He's the best. He's really good. Unfortunately, they're turning his studio into condos at the end of June, so we got to get in there, record real quick.
Our house is being torn down?
Yeah, those greedy fat cats out there. Condos. Everything you love is going to turn into condos one day.
Yeah, that's actually really sad.
But, we've done everything there. He's awesome at what he does, and he's going to keep doing it just somewhere else. So
fair enough.
Always love working with that guy, and he gets really good tones.
That's the hardest thing, is finding somebody who can make your music sound the way you guys hear it.
Yeah. Some of my earlier stuff, like with other bands, is a little more accessible. So he'd chime in, it's like, oh, what if you put the hook here, and this could be your pre-chorus. And then we started going in there with Pharm, and it's so all over the map. He's just like, sounds good.
That's funny. How many other bands have you been in the Okanagan?
I mean, like seriously, I've been in maybe 3 that have played gigs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were you in a band with Christopher Marshall as well?
Yeah. Back in the day.
What was that called?
Cosmic Brew.
Cosmic Brew.
Yeah, back in the Penticton days.
Yes, that's the one I was thinking of, because I remember you guys were playing around the same time I was in the Pasties, and we always like never linked up for shows, but I'd always see like voodoo shows and local shows with the name. It's funny to see like the progress and like how many musicians end up making like Okanagan supergroups, as I call them, right? Like,
yeah.
Lake Man would be one of those. High Horse is another one. Pharm would be another one. Like there's just these, because we lived in the area for so long and have like played alongside so many other musicians and made friendships, you end up jamming with them and creating the new bands, and it's really entertaining to see the evolution of the scene, even with Tidebringer, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Huge band, and like I grew up watching, like, quite literally hitchhiking to Kevin's shows, and now to see he's in another band and they're doing really well, it's like super cool to see. Or Jordan with Ukulele, like I like to call them like the godfathers of the music scene here.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how long you've been around, if you were around for the Stutterfly days, but those guys made the Kelowna music scene something that was magic.
Yeah, that was before my time, but you still hear rumblings about it, and people are still talking about it.
400 kids at a church jamming to like emo music, like it was just like, even think about it now, it's like I wish we could get those turnouts at a show. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's really hard to. I think it's also because we get older and our friends all have like bills and they don't want to pay the ticket. You know, that's what like a really hard thing is, trying to sell to your friends like, hey, come hang out and come listen to the music.
You got to make friends with people who don't have jobs, so then they don't mind coming out on a Tuesday.
You got to market to a younger audience whose parents are paying for the tickets. Big advocate of all ages shows.
Yeah, oh yeah, they're great.
It's besides music, what other kind of hobbies do you have?
I like gardening a lot, so we moved out here to the country, and I'm just kind of the helper, but in the summer we get all kinds of things growing. I like to grow like crazy spicy peppers and sneak them to my friends when they're not looking, or trick somebody into eating them. That's kind of my whole summertime project.
Have you ever done any social media content with farming?
Actually, we just did a big photo shoot. We're dressed up like farmers. We got all the implements, and need to get more dirt on the clothes next time, I think. We got the wheat sprigs in our mouth.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
You grow peppers. You should make a
Hot sauce.
I was just gonna say a farm hot sauce.
Yeah. We do have a farm hot sauce. It's made
do?
by the Big Daddy Rye company here in town.
Oh, cool.
But, well, we got Tegan. He's like a chef, and I'm growing these peppers, so we're going to kind of maybe dabble with making our own.
That's awesome.
Yeah, at the end of summer.
Where does he work?
He works at the Ship and Anchor. He's the head chef.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, it's funny how many musicians end up being like working in kitchens
Yeah.
and being chefs.
We'll go play a show, and people are like, "You guys smell like fish," and it's like, well, he's got an excuse. I don't know about me and Dylan there.
When are you guys heading back out on the road?
We'll be out in May going west. So we hit Vancouver Island, kind of Nanaimo, Port Alberni. Hornby Island's always a fun one. Sunshine Coast. So it's just super fun going out there. A lot of people don't want to take 3 ferries and get to Hornby Island to play. So you get there and everyone's like, I'm in. You know, it's Tuesday night. You get everybody out in the whole island there. They don't care what time it is, and it's a good time.
Cool. I've never actually heard about anybody taking up to Hornby Island. Like
It's
the
really
island's
fun.
intimidating as it is.
It's fun. We took 9 ferries, did a similar thing with our friends Rad Dog, who we're going back out on the road with again. So by the all was said and done, 9 ferries, and it's great. Yeah, they don't get a whole lot of stuff all the time, so.
The ferry there itself has become so expensive that Victoria is like, pardon me, the island's really intimidating almost to play at, to try and get there.
It's fun. It's like we show up to everything late all the time. Just kind of how it seems to work, herding all the cats and getting them into one spot. But everybody on the island's so chill and relaxed, and they don't care about what time it is either. So we all turn up at the same time 2 hours after it said door was supposed to start, and we make it work.
I definitely enjoyed playing Victoria and Nanaimo. Nanaimo is a super fun one. I performed at, I can't remember what the bar was. It's gone now, but we had a live band and everything with hip hop, and just like the vibe of the people on the island is almost kind of like the Kootenays.
Yeah.
They're very laid back and they enjoy their arts. And Vancouver's another unique one to play at. I always find it hard to play Vancouver too because it's so big and you're competing with so many
10 other shows.
things. Yeah.
Oh, but when it hits, it really hits.
It does.
Yeah.
And that's like the magic of why Vancouver bands blow up realistically, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Okanagan has so many like unique little pockets that I love those shows that also pop off. Like your guys' last one, you know what I mean? Where Norm's shoes are breaking. I find those are like almost like house party vibe. I miss the house party vibe.
All your friends are there, and I went down to see a show in Penticton the other day, and it's like there's 12 people from Kelowna here right now, and it's good support all around the Okanagan.
There is, and we have such a the Okanagan itself. Its arts community is extremely diverse. And I think it's also because we're a wine region, and wine and arts kind of go hand in hand, right? So you have to have that culture It's just our culture is very singer-songwriter and like bluegrass and blues, and it's got its little underground clique of metal and heavy music, but it is like so perfect.
Yeah, that's why I love what we do and being the heavy bands. And it's like kind of big daddy government might not want you being around. You got the tourists, the tourism dollars, and all of a sudden they walk by this nice wine place, and then maybe they'll walk by like Jackknife and hear somebody going like, ah! It's bad for tourism, but we're not going anywhere.
Well, it's also kind of funny because like the mentality of heavy music is very like there's a negative outlook on it. But a lot of the people moving into politics and becoming part of city councils and have tattoos and colored hair and they all listen to heavy music, and it's just kind of like we're at that middle ground of changing over from the older culture to the modern day culture, where things are like you see metal in so many pop culture things now, from commercials to movies, and I don't see it slowing down. I don't think that it'll ever slow down. Like it's definitely a slow road, especially like metal's been going since the 60s realistically.
Yeah.
And it's always had a negative aspect on it. Even when Metallica was the biggest thing ever, they were still hated. You know what I mean? It's the slow progress
Yeah.
that really makes it worth it, though.
Yeah, we're going to do what we do, and you can't really change it.
Especially as a prog brand. Like, you have no limits, right? If you wanted to put in some parts that are reggae, like, why not?
Exactly, yeah.
And I think that's where it's kind of like there's no limit to prog, and where it's always going to continue to, no pun intended, progress. But it's just going to it's very progressive. It's why it's made. It's not ever going to get stale. And I think that's why I look at it like it's the Beethovens, the Bachs, the Mozarts of modern day. You have to understand theory, you have to understand feeling, you have to understand the culture of the music you're writing. How do you transcend that to the listeners, though?
Yeah, make it cool still, because sometimes it's real nerdy, but like if you can find that balance and get some hooky parts, or make something that is really complicated sound not complicated, then you're right in the sweet spot.
Are you into anime?
A little bit, here and there.
I find it's just under, or like just younger than us, that is really into it. And I've pondered in my brain, this is just a weird thought that I have, is like connecting the younger crowd to metal, because we grew up with like loving Lord of the Rings and fantasy
Yeah.
stuff, that's kind of where we're drawn to writing, because that's what we enjoy. But anime has become so popular in the world with the younger generations that it's like, do we just start writing about anime stories, right?
Yeah.
And then maybe they're just like, ooh, I like this. Because it's like culture changes constantly. Music changes, but musicians tend to be the hardest thing to change. Right?
Stubborn group.
Especially metalheads. They're very... If you want to hear gatekeepers in any industry, it's metalheads. They're so difficult to please. Nothing's ever going to be heavy enough. Like, there's always going to be something to complain about that a band did, that a band didn't. That it's almost not worth writing. Not that it's not worth writing, but it's not worth investing your time to listen to the criticism, the negative criticism that's always going to be coming at you. Because, like, if you focus, like, one big thing that I find with, like, social media is there's always people's opinions about your music or your quality of the video you put out, and it usually is coming from people who don't do it, right? Like, the person's complaining about your video editing, and it's like they've never edited a video.
That's we kind of made like the crappiest videos possible and edited ourselves. It's like somebody's like, "Oh, this is horrible." It's like, I don't know.
I literally...
We did it like that on purpose.
And that's the thing, right? I just had somebody comment on a video I just released for hip hop, and they're like, this is okay. And I'm like, the whole point of me putting that video out was it to be bad. I filmed a music video in a cheese grater, bro. Like, I'm not
Then you're
expecting,
untouchable.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
I'm not expecting anyone to be like, oh my God, that's amazing. But it's like, I find it funny. And there's going to be a pocket of people who find that funny when they see the Easter egg. Like, is that dude rapping inside of a cheese grater? Yeah. It's supposed to be dumb. And I think that's where we were talking earlier. Like, people take themselves way too seriously. You don't need to be. Like, people are going to gravitate to you either way. It doesn't matter what you're singing about or what you are. One of my favorite bands is Jokesters. Like, Electric Callboy is, you want, like, humor, right? Like, or Tenacious D, you want humor,
Yeah.
and right.
Yep. That's what it's all about.
I think it's what's needed in
Yeah.
music nowadays.
Yeah, people want to go have a good time when they go out, so.
And that's kind of the thing, is like, you guys have a good time on all elements of your writing. When you're writing, you're enjoying yourself. When you're lyrics, you're enjoying yourself, recording, performing. I think that kind of shines more than like the bands who are so focused on their instrument and they're just like,
Yeah.
like, for me, it's, you're performers. You're supposed to perform,
Yeah.
right? You're entertainers and you're musicians. So like, what you do is art
Yeah.
on any form.
Sometimes, like, after a show, it's like, wow, I made a lot of mistakes, but, nobody's talking about that. It's like, well, did you have a good time? Yeah.
Especially when it comes to recording. Like, I was talking with Steve Jones, and he's been performing since the 90s. Like, he was performing when I was 1. And we were talking about perfection in music and how, like, all the greatest songs in the world, like, Let It Be from the Beatles, it has a mess up in it. There's a huge mess up in it on the piano, and it doesn't matter. Or like Hotel California, there's parts of the guitar that are not, they're off. And like other songs that have these little tiny flaws that realistically is what makes the song magical.
Yeah, it's just written by humans.
Exactly, right? Like, I think with that, like, this huge push, anti-push of like everyone complaining about AI nowadays, like, making your music so structured kind of ruins it. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
especially like, I do enjoy writing to a click. I won't say I don't, but at the same time, I miss the days of just picking up an instrument and playing with my friends, and it's just playing. It's not like worrying about any like the political aspects or like, is this good enough for people? Just kind of like, what you fell in love with music, which is writing music with friends.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the older I get becomes more important than like performing every weekend. It's like,
Oh, yeah.
like,
Just seeing the buds and catching up and making a lot of noise.
do you find it difficult to balance, like, we're kind of talking about it earlier, but like, how much you want to be on the road?
Yeah, I mean, it's really fun to do it. It's just like, you got to make sure it's worthwhile sometimes. Like, you can tell, especially after doing it for a bit, it's like, okay, well, I'm going to drive 10 hours and play in front of 13 people. It's like, going to stay home that weekend and do some gardening or, practice if I'm lucky. So it's just kind of gauging if it's worthwhile. And
How do you make that decision
at
the end of the day?
Yeah, at the end of the day, I guess it's like, if you got to go into new places, but like along the way, you can go to places that you've been before and it'll be great. So even if it's not a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, you enjoyed the journey there and it's still worthwhile.
Have you ever had a point, maybe on tour, because I find that that's when like the most clashing happens with bands, where you were just like, this is not what I want?
Not really. Like, I've always enjoyed it, but maybe, a month into a tour, it's like, ooh, I sure would enjoy sleeping in my own bed and seeing some of the comforts of home.
Yeah. That
But,
a month tour is pretty difficult too.
Yeah, but there's always enjoyment, and at least still, anyway.
I find like it's not even butting heads of bands. It's more just like the stress of, oh, we gotta fill up gas. Like an example, we were playing Intersect one year. We played, I think, 2 years or 3 years, but we almost ran out of gas like, half an hour before we got to the festival. And every gas station in Alberta just happens to always magically be closed, even though they make gas. And we rolled onto this like small reserve, and the gas station is like 3 minutes to closing. And like the relief that you could feel in the car the moment we pulled up and we could get gas was like the tensions were so high, and it was not even like any of us mad at each other, but it's just like dude, like it's just so stressful that after it just becomes the funniest moment ever. Like, you know, like all of those struggle points along the road end up becoming my favorite points of the tour. And in the moment it's like the hardest thing to cope with, and like I find that's really what I love about traveling with the boys, is like the in-between, not even performing. It hasn't even become being on stage anymore. It's just like when you're camping. And like Cole one time when we were at AMF, he's like so tired and he's trying to have this serious conversation with us. He's falling asleep while talking, and then all of a sudden I just look over and he's like crawling to the tent, and he's just like, good night. And just those moments, right? Like, it's just, I don't know, it's funny. And I think that's like the magic of being in a band is kind of, like I was saying, it's really hard to define in words. With Pharm, you guys have a very unique brotherhood, and you can see it when you're on stage.
Yeah, we've done a lot of crazy stuff, so it's can't go anywhere really, or we got so much dirt on each other that everyone's stuck in there forever now. It's just a locked in dark brotherhood. That's funny. With your guys' next album coming out, do you plan to go back all the way across Canada? Could happen. Yeah, we're getting well, every Instagram post we make, there's one guy, come to Toronto, so we gotta appease that one guy. And I've been dying to try one of them red potatoes on the Isle of Prince Edward Island. So
I think that'd be a fun one. You never hear anybody touring all the way that way. You know, you like Montreal and like Quebec is like the furthest you go. So I would love to see what the shows would be like out there.
Yeah.
So that is like a very unique thing. Traveling that way though, that's a lot of driving. One guy in Toronto said he could, and he was fairly inebriated at the time, but he owned the bar. He said he could get some grant money from the film industry and use that as an excuse to fly us in. So that would be a big time saver. Yeah, because I guess you could film technically pay you guys because you're in the film. Yeah, I could see
Perhaps we got some good friends in Quebec, Sons of Arrakis. They're awesome. But we're going to fly them down to BC, and they can just borrow all our stuff, and then maybe they'll do the same. We'll go down there. And
it's kind of what you have to do.
Your flight's quite a drive there.
Realistically, the hardest part is drums, and if you have a specific amp like that you need to play with. Because instrument-wise, it's become a lot easier in Canada to fly, especially with guitars, because now they apparently it goes to the front. It's the first thing loaded, thing loaded and first thing unloaded. There's like strollers and stuff, which is magical because now you don't have to worry about losing your instrument.
I think I'd be wearing sweatpants and a sweater and just shove my bass down the front.
Right.
I still don't trust those guys.
Well, you also play a Rickenbacker, don't you?
Yeah, it's my baby.
That's not. Yeah, I wouldn't trust anybody with one of those. That's some expensive.
Don't even trust myself with that thing half the time.
Right. If you had any advice for upcoming musicians who might see this, that are trying to start themselves in the industry, because the number one question I get asked is, how do you go from jam band to standing on stage and being successful at it? what advice would you give to younger musicians?
Ooh. Well, just practice a lot until you get to that point, and reach out locally and get all your friends to come out, and they'll tell their friends, and can really grow like quite organically if you do it that way. Don't try to force anything, but keep making those incremental steps and make sure you're prepared and practice. I think that would do it.
Awesome. I want to thank you for doing this. I really appreciate your input and getting to know you as
Thank
a person.
you so much. Yeah.
And
It's fun.
we'll catch you guys next time.
Toodaloo.